Today's podcast is sponsored by Fire Facilities Incorporated, expert engineers, designers, and manufacturers of steel training towers, burn rooms, and mobile units that are all made in the USA. Okay, so this is the third take of, hey, welcome back to 3-Point Firefighter. So tonight's guest is Mike Wallingford Jr. He is a captain with the Jeffersontown Fire and EMS. He is currently assigned to a HazMat Engine. Now, Mike also is the safety director for Flynn Brothers Construction. So working in these two industries has helped Mike identify the need for further education in the fire service of the pre-planning needs that construction sites pose. 3 takes, and I finally nailed it. Brother Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me, Jake.
Did you enjoy the behind-the-scenes look at my ignorance?
Hey, man, it's, you know what, as long as we're having a good time, I think that's all that's going to matter to anybody listening.
Hey, firefighters talking to firefighters, how can you not have a good time?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, brother, you work over across the river in J-Town. Tell me a little bit about what got you in the fire service and what got you where you're at right now.
Born and raised through it. So I've been around it for all of my life. My father's been affiliated with the fire department for as long as I can remember. So growing up around a firehouse, did it for a long time. Joined as a volunteer in 1995. Went career in 2004. I had a stint before I went career that I worked for Anheuser-Busch and thought I was going to be making all the money in the world, and watching my buddies get hired at the fire department. And one day I kind of looked back and I said, I'm looking at these guys retiring from the beer truck, and they're 65 years old and they're broke down, beaten, and battered. And my buddies are going to be in their mid 40s, and eligible to retire. I said, I might need to rethink this a little bit. So that's when I went career in 2004, and it's been an awesome ride. It's been an awesome ride.
I've never heard a firefighter say, man, this sucks.
Yeah, no, there's some days where we're sitting there and you're within your station and you've got all of your people around, and you go, there's some days you're just shocked that they pay you to do what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I've said this before, where you have, the volunteers outnumber the career firefighters like 1 billion to 1.
Sure.
That tells you how much this job it means to people, right? How great this job is, because you're not going to see that number with volunteer dentists or doctors or lawyers. You're just not. And absolutely. I think that is really, the volunteers are truly a testament to how much fun it is to be a firefighter and how rewarding it is to be a firefighter.
Yeah. And in today's cultures, I know it's extremely hard for the volunteer departments to retain people. It seems like none of us have the time we used to. So right. That makes it so hard. And in some areas it is kind of a dying breed, which is a real sad reality, because some of the most fun times in the fire service were when we were doing it for fun. And it wasn't just your career or your job. So you look back on those times, and man, there's tons of memories some of which we probably can't talk about, but it's, there's a lot of fun things that you got to do back then.
So I got made a training officer 10 years ago ish. This is my 10th year. And looking back on it now, it was so much fun up to becoming a training officer. Now, it's still fun, don't get me wrong, but it's probably the first time in my entire career that it actually feels like a job. Going to do shift work and riding fire trucks, that never felt like a job. Once you get in the office, it starts to feel like a job. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just a different, weird vibe. But yeah, hey, it's my own doing, right?
yeah, you applied for it, man.
I know, right? They didn't force me. They put a gun to my head and said, "Hey, make everybody unhappy in the fire department." I'm like, "Oh, okay, sure."
Train on Sundays, that'll help.
Oh, if only. I would love to be able to train at night. So, okay, we're going down a few rabbit holes, and that's what I love about this podcast. So yeah. I'm going to sprinkle some magic fairy dust. Here's what I wish I could do as a training officer. I wish I could train at night in the rain and or when it's really, really cold, like 10 degrees or maybe 5 degrees below. And the reason is you can force a door on a door prop all day long when it's sunny and shiny and hot and all that stuff. But when you can barely feel your fingers and when you bang on that metal, it sends like pain through your arms. I think that's real training. That's real knowledge there.
And you know, it's so funny, Jake, that you mentioned that. And I really think that is going to lead in to some of the things that we're going to talk about later on in the podcast about kind of why I'm here. But it's essentially talking about doing things in perfect conditions when there's a lot of times where the risk and the hazards associated with those things can happen in places that you're just not used to responding to. So I think you're so right. And we're fair. Some of us are, we get that fair weather when it comes to training. When it's pouring down rain outside, you just don't think, let's go throw ladders. But yeah, you're right.
I do got a few people that do that stuff, love that stuff. There's nothing wrong with being a good firefighter, but I can't help but be in love with those great firefighters,
Oh, 100%. Anybody that's they come in the morning and it's go, go, go. You can't give them enough. That's honestly, that's something that it's a long lost art, especially in some of the newer generations. So, I love seeing it, especially in these young guys. Love seeing that.
Oh my goodness, yes. So we were talking a little bit off camera here. Matter of fact, we almost kept talking, forgot about the podcast, but we were talking about how your dad and one of my boss who's been on my show twice now. Now, when he was on my show, he was not my boss. He was a rank lower. He has since, and I'd like to think that the podcast is what put him over the top.
Complete elevation.
It had to be.
Oh,
it had to be.
No doubt.
So, Deputy Chief Cron now and your dad work together. Tell me a little bit about that.
So my dad started in the fire service in the late 70s in a volunteer department. Then he went career for several years and then went to work for state fire rescue training here in the state of Kentucky. But Tim Cron and my father and Tim's dad, God rest his soul, awesome fella. Mm-hmm. There used to be a fire school that would happen over in southern Indiana, over in New Albany, and my dad and Mr. Cron and of course Tim, they all worked together in that, and so knowing the Cron family for quite some time, I've had some pretty fun times with Tim. He's something else.
I don't think he could do anything else. I think if you said, "Hey, we're going to pay for your school to be a doctor," he'd say, "No, thank you."
No,
I think he regrets. Right. Yeah, I think he regrets being off the trucks. But I think, in his mind, and I believe he is, he's trying to make the department better. But I know when those trucks roll out of Station 3 and he hears those go out past his window, he's kind of be like, "Oh man, what did I do?"
I'm sure he'll find his way to a hook or a line occasionally.
All right, look. So I had you on here for a damn reason, and this damn reason is, Tim Cron got a hold of me. Let me back up. So there was a fatality in a trench, in a county near us, and Tim, my boss, Chief Cron, said, "Hey, look, we got to get a hold of this guy." I kind of knew you before, right?
Sure.
I wouldn't say we're best friends. I never got a Christmas card from you, so I can assume you didn't like me that much.
It's in the mail.
But it's in the mail. He said, "This guy is the trench man," right? So I got a hold of you, and we started talking. And I'm really interested in what you're doing. So you work for a construction company as a safety guy. You're a firefighter. Those two seem to coincide very well. Tell me, when did you do the construction thing to help your fire department career, or was that just by accident?
I'll tell you what, I was blessed enough to start working with a consulting group in 2004. And I did OSHA regulatory safety consulting and training. And man was blessed to be able to travel all over the United States to do it for power generation plants and chemical manufacturing companies and a whole lot in the distillery businesses, which was probably the favorites. And through all of that and through some of the relationships that I was able to build, I was actually asked in 2016 to join a construction company here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I actually took that role, and it was as a safety coordinator for a large construction company here as well, and for a couple of reasons. I loved the travel, but a family, that kind of I was gone a lot sometimes, and there was trades and everything else that you had to have, for the fire department. It really affected family life, and so this was an opportunity to be home every night that I wasn't at the firehouse, and home on the weekends, of course, when my schedule allowed. But and then just over a year ago, I had another company that actually offered me their safety director's position, and I took that, and it was a big leap. And so I tell people all the time, I'm doubly blessed. I have two careers that I just absolutely love, and that helps. We talked about Tim Cron earlier, and we were talking about kind of the passion that fella's had, and I think he's been doing it for, it seems like 80 years. But
yeah, he's 104.
That's right. Looks like he's 50. He's 104. Yeah. He's aging well. But being able to go into that construction side of things is something that I really took and just really ran with it. And over the past several years, I've seen where the fire service and the construction business were meeting too much. And unfortunately, construction site emergencies, things like that, that's not something we teach in a drill school or on a Tuesday night training or, at a weekend fire school typically. So I found an opportunity. And a couple of years ago, I taught for a local fire department because they had a trench emergency in their district. And thankfully, no one was killed in that. The young man did suffer some pretty serious injuries, but it wasn't because the trench went bad. It was because of some things that happened outside of the trench, and some of the spoil pile rolled in. Just a large dirt clod rolled in and broke a leg. And when the fire department arrived, one of the things that they didn't know, or first the EMS unit arrived, what they didn't know was, is this safe or not for us to go into? And it kind of clicked in my head because it was actually one of my job sites. And when you get an alert on your phone from the fire department that there's a trench rescue, and you see the address and it's one of your job sites for your construction site, your heart drops. And
right.
And boy, you're on the phone, you're trying to call. And so that's where I saw a need, and I created a class called Dirt Basics. And I taught for 3 shift days to that fire department, just the basics of what they're up against so that they can make a better informed, decision, tactical, if they were to arrive at something like that ever again. And then it sprouted from there. So luckily, 2 years ago, I was able to present at FDIC, which was awesome. It was one of the coolest experiences for first time experience, when you're walking around, in the instructor's lounge with some just absolute legends, and
mm-hmm.
they treat you like you've been friends for 20 years. And that was a really cool experience. So luckily we can talk about it in a little bit, but I'll be back in 2023. So I'm super stoked about that.
That is a high point of anybody's career, wouldn't you say?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And to going through the entire, process is pretty wild at first. And hopefully if anyone from there's ever listening, one email they need to send out to everybody is to make sure that you have a suit, because I missed that memo the first year.
Oh, what'd you wear?
Well, I didn't pack a suit. Luckily, Indianapolis is not far from Louisville, Kentucky, and I'd had some other guys that were coming up throughout the week. So our assistant chief lives across the street from me, and he brought it up with him the day of my class. Yeah, so it was pretty nice. So I know for a fact in April there's one thing that gets packed first, and that is my suit. So have to make sure I've got all of that, because that was something. So it was a great experience though.
So since we're already talking about it, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the class itself. You say you're presenting the same class this year or a different class?
I've updated some things, changed some things up, but I will be presenting on Wednesday at 3:30.
Before I rudely interrupted,
Yeah.
what were you saying about FDIC in your new class? The updated
So,
class.
That's right. Yeah. So the class is really designed about teaching the everyday firefighters, because there's plenty of people out there that are trained in trench rescue. They're the trench rescue technicians and confined space technicians and all of these, the rope and high angle and all of those things. But they are far outweighed by the average everyday firefighter. You think of, we talked earlier about volunteer fire departments, man, equipment wise, at times they're not equipped to handle something that, a larger municipality would be able to handle. So because of that, there's a lot of challenges on a construction site. And as we all know, the government just passed a $1.3 trillion infrastructure, bill. Guess what that means? That means that there's going to be a ton more construction going on all across the U.S. So you're going to see it everywhere. But let's face it, construction is everywhere. You drive past it all the time. But as the fire service, emergency services, how much do we pay attention to it? Everybody's so quick to do the pre-plan of a building once it has people moving into it or the new business is there. How many times have you looked at a construction site the same way? Because there's a ton of work going on inside of a construction site that's posing a ton of hazards and risk to the firefighters and the other responders. We just don't think about that. When they put that big fence up and they've got everything up that says stay out, danger, construction site, we do that. We listen. And something that I'm trying to encourage is more partnerships. I want people to understand more, and I'm very blessed. United Rentals Trench Safety has a local office here, and I have a partnership with a gentleman named Jace Ganshert, and Jace is awesome with me, man. He gives me all kinds of handout materials and everything to be able to provide to the people that I'm teaching these classes for. And there are things that can go on the rig, trifolds that go on the rig that tells you everything you should know about a trench to know that it's safe. Because I'm encouraging people. I want you to stop. I want you to stop at a job site and see what's going on. I want you to look over on the side of the road and see the guys trenching and notice that something's wrong and speak up and say something about it. But the reason why we don't is because we're not educated in it. You're not going to stop somewhere and say, this doesn't look safe. And, a bunch of construction guys look at you and go, what do you know? Driving around a big red or yellow or white fire truck, you know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where I want to educate you so you feel more confident in saying, hey guys, this doesn't look that good, because I'd much rather you take the 5 or 10 minutes it takes to do something like that than I would for you to spend the 5 to 10 to 15 hours later digging somebody out. So it's much easier to do it on the front side. So that's what the class is built upon. Trench, kind of a trench awareness type thing is a portion of it, but it goes deeper than that. I mean, because, confined spaces and people working at heights, these guys that are either in man baskets, things like that, or they're working from those buildings when all the buildings go vertical. Someone falls from there and they're suspended from there. You're on that time clock. You've got, a 15-minute-ish window that somebody's going to be able to hang there. And everybody's answer is always, well, we'll pull the ladder truck up there, we'll set the ladder and we'll go get them. Boys and girls,
right.
There's a lot of times there's not a road there yet for your ladder truck, or like, for instance, right now we've had rain the last couple of days. You can only imagine what that does to a job site that hasn't been rocked or paved or concrete, around it. It's still in the infancy of building the building, but people are working at height. So that's what the class is designed to do: bring you in a little bit more than the 10,000 foot view, but give you enough, give you enough to feel confident in saying, hey, I either want to learn more about this, look into it more yourself, because there's plenty of resources out there, and I share a ton of those resources. to help educate. I'm not saying you have to be a trench rescue technician. I'm not saying that at all, because there's a lot of places that don't have all the tools to be able to perform as one. But that doesn't mean that education isn't going to help you with some kind of tactical decision, because when they call, they're going to want us to come and do something.
Right.
We're not just going to stand around. So,
and that, I think that's one of the problems in the fire service. And you hear all hazards fire department, and I love the idea. I love the premise behind being an all hazards fire department. But I shouldn't say but, and it does get expensive when I'll give you an example. So we do swift water because we're a river town. We do high angle, low angle, rope rescue. We do confined space. We do HazMat up to the operations level. And I think technically will be a technical or a trench rescue awareness sort of after we get some of your training. That is an awful lot of money in just equipment and training. And if you've got a bigger department, now let's say like, maybe even Louisville, Kentucky, they got a pretty big department, right? They can dedicate companies and engines to each technical rescue, right? You can have, they do HazMat, they do this. Well, we pretty much have to do it all.
Right.
And that's where on the smaller departments, I think it is such a resource hog. Now, to your point earlier, when people call 911, they expect you to get them out of any possible situation. So knowing everything, at least up to the awareness level, and practicing it, and hopefully going above and beyond, I think is crucial to protecting your community, protecting your citizens. But let me ask you this. How many actual trench accidents do you think get reported to 911? Because I've had a few talks with people about this, and I want to get your take on it.
Well, I would say you're probably somewhere around a 50-50. And the reason why I say that is because you have a lot of construction companies out there that are educated. They're given equipment, and I tell my guys in the construction side all the time, you can do everything by the book and something can still go wrong. And that's with anything you do. You could dig that trench to a T and have it benched back beautifully and everything looks gorgeous. But at the end of the day, it's dirt. And it almost has a mind of its own at times. And even though it looks pretty and you've done all your soil samples and all that stuff to see what it is, and it looks gorgeous, that does not mean that it's not going to fail. And that's the reason why I have some crews that always drag a trench box. I have some crews that, they all choose their own methods of how they're going to perform their trench. So there are some educated companies out there. There are some companies out there, unfortunately, that, the guy down in the trench that just got buried is who? He's the newest guy in there. Has he ever had any training at all? Well, not likely, but so why did he jump down in there? Well, because the boss said so, and you're not going to look at the boss and say, I've never had that kind of training. I don't know what I'm doing down there. You're going to say, you got it, boss. And I'm going to jump down there because he wants to work and he wants to get a paycheck, as a family to support. So when something like that happens, it's also extremely dependent on where you are. Did anybody else see it? Are you in a highly populated area, or can we get him out of here? We've talked about Indianapolis several times. Those guys over the past couple of years have had a ton. They've had 3 or 4, that they've made. They just made one last week that was absolutely incredible for somebody to be trapped for 40 minutes and survive. And from the looks of it, just the picture, Indianapolis does a great job on their social media sharing the pictures and everything like that. And I will tell you, anybody that gets a chance to go and look at some of those pictures, it was extremely impressive, the work that those guys did, and guys and gals did, to be able to rescue that worker. That gentleman is extremely lucky, because trench deaths across the U.S. have grown last couple of years. There's more and more every single day that we see that. And like I said, that's one part of a construction site, just one. Unfortunately for us here in the Kentuckiana area, the Louisville and Indiana area, in the past 6 months, we've had 2 deaths. They had one in the south end of Louisville here just a couple of months ago, unfortunately for a gentleman. And then, of course, you all had the one 2 weeks ago just in one of your neighboring counties. So it's here. They're doing it. And so I go back to your original question, probably 50-50, maybe a little bit more on the reported side because of sheer panic.
I've been struggling with energy lately, and I won't take any of those energy shots or energy drinks because they're so bad for you. Now, Magic Mind is a healthy blend of safe ingredients to help you have more productivity with less stress and more energy, all without having those harmful chemicals that will make you feel like your heart's going to explode. It is a much safer and better choice with natural ingredients. Now, Magic Mind has hooked up all my listeners. So if you go to www.magicmind.co/3point and put in the code 3.20, that's 3, the number 3, point, the numbers 2 and 0, you put that in, you will get 40% off your subscription for the next 10 days. Be sure to check it out. Let me ask you this. What about, where's the dividing line? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear a professional's take on this. The dividing line between confined space, permit required, and trench.
Can a trench be a confined space? Sure. It can meet the criteria. There's three things. It's got to be large enough for you to get into, limited means of entry and exit, and then, of course, not designed for continuous, employee occupancy. So you've got all that, right? Well, then for it to be permit required, you got to meet another one. And one of those other ones is contain or have the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere. Well, it depends on what you're doing,
because that was my question. Could they not run into hydrogen sulfide, methane, and O2 deficient atmosphere?
Yeah, absolutely. Or the carbon monoxide that's put off by the pumps that's removing all of the water, that is collecting in the bottom, or from the pieces of equipment they're utilized to open the trench or do other work nearby. There's so many things, but that's the reason why the standard says at 4 feet you must test the atmosphere. But how many companies out there are truly doing that? How many of them do you see with a 4-gas, air monitor? Well, there are a lot of companies out there that are, and that are doing that. And then there's others that they're like, what do you mean I have to do that at 4 feet? It's like, well, yeah, that's kind of what it says. And they're going to hold you to that. And unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, everybody looks at OSHA like they're the bad guys. OSHA is the industry police. Right, that's their job is to protect the workers themselves, and right now they're on a big push. They're on a big push because trench deaths are so high. So there's a ton of low hanging fruit, and we as the fire department, when we respond to these things, we're not immune from an OSHA citation, depending on what we do, even in emergency scenarios. So that's the reason why I think, what I'm doing is trying to educate a little bit more to help protect the people that are doing it, but giving them some options of things to actually do that are safe enough to be done. Because I myself, I'm not a trench rescue technician at all. And it's never been something I've wanted to do. Digging ditches was not my thing. I had a uncle that was a plumber, and he used to drop me off to dig holes for him around gas services, and he'd drop me off with a shovel and a spade and a big cooler full of water, and he'd say, I'll be back in a few hours to get you, and I was just like, at that point, I knew I never wanted to be a trench tech, so made that decision very early.
Yeah, my dad was a plumber, and he always said, I'll be damned if I'm going to buy or rent a ditch witch when I've got 3 sons. And he would do the same thing. He would drop us off with a bunch of water and 3 shovels, or actually it was 4 shovels in case one broke, because he didn't want to hear it. And yeah, so I get that. I look back on it now, knowing what I know. I'm like, man, I've been over my head in trenches before, doing stuff for my dad. And, you see the dirt kind of come in and all that. So let me ask you this. There's a guy in a trench. He's the trench has kind of caved in on him, 4-foot trench. He's now buried up to his chest, having a hard time breathing. I pull up as a firefighter. from positioning to getting to the patient, what do I need to know?
Well, the first thing is in a lot of cases, there's so many people that, we have the old adage that, you want to stop every piece of equipment. You want to pull everybody away from it. You want to wait for the professionals to arrive to be able to do something. Well, let's face it. How long is that going to take? This person, we're not talking about a long period of time that this person is going to be able to survive this, because as you talked about, being buried to their chest, every time they take that breath, they inhale, exhale, and all of that comes around them. A cubic yard of soil, 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, weighs anywhere from 2,700 to 3,000 pounds. That's a lot of weight, right?
Yes.
And that stuff moves swiftly when it decides to go. And unfortunately, someone that's buried up to their chest, their survival is it may, that rate is going to lower quite quickly the longer they're exposed to that. So you can't jump in there. But one of the things that we as emergency responders are really going to have to deal with, and it's going to be extremely hard, is that person's typically not working alone. So they probably have 3, 4, 5 coworkers. They may just have 2. They may have 10. Who knows? What do you think those people are going to want to do? And how are you going to stop them? Yeah,
right.
That's right. That's right.
So you want to use them when you can.
Well, you do in a safe manner, and in a lot of cases, you're dealing with individuals that know what they're doing, and sometimes just an unfortunate accident has happened. But that doesn't mean that we're going to fire up an excavator and just start digging, because the last thing I want to do is start bringing out limbs, right? Because we've dug too close. But are there other things that we can get set up and try to do in a safe manner? Every one of these trenches are going to be different. You've watched tons of, you see videos and you do all of that. None of them are ever the same. They're never the same, because you're never digging in the same dirt. So each one of these events is going to pose a huge risk. The one thing I never want anybody to do is walk right up to the edge, because if you've already had a collapse of some sort, I don't know what that other wall, all of that weight that's on top is going straight down, whether it's a spoil pile on that side or anything. All of that weight is pushing straight down. Well, eventually it has to go somewhere else, and it's going to start to go out, and it, travels the path of least resistance. Well, that path is what we've created in now having an open wall. It's no longer solid ground. So you standing on an edge likely can cause that other cave in if you have any type of instability below you, and now you've just become a part of the problem. So unfortunately, in a lot of cases, there's not anything that first arriving company can do directly to be able to get in and help that person out, because you can't put yourself in harm's way in that manner. And secondly, you don't want to become a part of the problem. So that's the reason why I'm trying to educate about, are there ground pads we can put out to try to help, spread out some of that weight that we're going to be standing on to try to help somebody out. What other means are you going to be able to find to assist in your efforts of trying to save somebody? But unfortunately, as you look across the U.S., how many of these people actually survive? It's low. It's low. And I used to always say that, they call these trench rescue teams, but the largest majority of what they're doing is recovery. But we've got a lot of other options. There's vacuum excavators. All kinds of companies use vacuum excavators now. And that's a tool that I want local fire departments to be able to know, hey, build that relationship now. We have several of them here in our area, and they travel over to your areas as well, like Badger Daylighting, big company. They've got plenty of trucks. Can you call them and say, I need you here now? And you put that truck there, and they can start vac excavating, and no one ever gets in. That may help, but how long is that going to take? So trying to build the relationships on the front side is really what a big part of that is. But getting the education, step 1, building the relationship, step 2, and then hoping to God you never have to use it as step 3. That's the biggest thing.
Do you think, because it's like the least sexy of the technical rescues, it doesn't get enough attention and enough education on?
Oh, 100%. I say this in the most endearing way, and I tell people all the time. I say we as firemen were dumb, and I'm not saying that in a bad. We're just not educated on it, right? Um, if you were to call OSHA and find out where the majority of referral calls come from when it comes to trenching and excavating, I can tell you the largest majority comes from fire departments. Why? Because we're not educated. We're not educated enough to go, that's not right. Man, I should stop those guys. So what do?
Right.
We call the people that are educated about it, right? So we call OSHA, the OSHA office. And in the state of Kentucky, we have a Kentucky OSHA office. So that's who we deal with. So the big thing is they call that. They show up for a referral, and one thing leads to another, and pens start coming out, and pieces of paper start coming out, and people are getting fined, and all kinds of things are happening when it could have been. And I'm not saying you shouldn't call OSHA by all means. If somebody's doing something wrong, it needs to be addressed. But there could be an attempt on the front side, especially by us, if you feel confident or a lot more comfortable about what you're looking at and what they should be doing. And like I said, something as simple as that little trifold from United Rentals Trench Safety, man, those guys, you open that up and it's like its own little manual of what it should look like. So it helps out having a quick reference like that. But yeah, you're right. No, it's the least sexiest out of all of the disciplines, because who wants to go out there and get dirty and nasty and muddy and sweaty and all that stuff? But the great thing is we do have, firefighters from across the U.S. or from all around that do have a passion for it. So I'm hopeful to be able to educate people on all of this stuff, and you never have to use it. I wish I could do the same thing I know we just had a trench rescue tech class here in Louisville. Had about 28, 30 students, and I came in to teach the OSHA portion of it on, kind of what OSHA's looking out for. So they did a great job, dug them some good trenches. They had some, great training, but I hope they never have to use it.
Yeah, no, you're right. And the thing about it is not every community has, some industries that you might need confined space. Not every community has, tall buildings for high angle rescue. A lot of communities don't have any kind of moving water, but every community has some type of construction going on. Yeah. So it seems like it should be one of the first technical rescues a fire department should be invested in.
And when we always talk about building construction, it's the building itself. It's not everything.
Yes, we talked about this. Yeah, you and I talked about this before we started recording.
Up to it. Yeah. So that's the part we're missing. There's so many things that go on before a building pad is ever laid, before the first stick or the first set of steel goes up. There's so many things that happen on the front side of that pose tons of risk to the workers that are doing it and the responders that would have to respond in the case. And I'm talking about things as simple as a medical run on a construction site.
Right.
We're going to have access issues in a lot of cases, and we talk about, people working from heights up on these buildings when they do go vertical, and they fall. That ladder truck's not going to make it there. We have access issues everywhere. Those are things I want people to identify on the front side, to know that we're not going to be able to get that there. So here's our plan B on what we're going to do, not having to make plan B when you break through that fence.
I think that's an excellent point, and I think it goes to pre-planning in every aspect of firefighting. I've seen this. I've done this. Guilty as charged. You go to, say, you do a tour of a old folks home, and so you're sitting around and you go, okay. After your tour, you go, well, I guess we would park here. We'd come through this door. We'd go up these stairs. Boom. Okay, so now let's say that for whatever reason you can't get that front door. What are you going to do? Right. We got to come up with plan A, plan B, and plan C, I think. And to your point earlier, we need to treat the construction of a building just as important as the building itself when it comes to hurting people and hurting ourselves.
Sure. I mean, and you also think about how many people are out there that are in a command role or a lead role that and we've all met them. I know 'em, that they really need to have about 90% of the information before they can make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of these cases, you're going to have to make a decision based off of about 10%. And it's still got to be a pretty doggone good, decision. So that's something that we talk about. Some of the tactics. That's what I want to increase the knowledge on the front side, and then putting together some tactics on things that you can do to keep yourself safe. It's not necessarily tactics to get the job done. It's tactics to keep you safe and keep moving in a positive direction, instead of us all standing around and going, we're not trench rescue certified. The closest one, I don't even know where the closest one is. So finding out where those resources are, finding out what else is in your communities, from a community that has a couple hundred people all the way up to, a couple 100,000 people. It doesn't really matter. You're all posed with the same threats. It's how you prepare for it on the front side, and you talked about it. People, it's not just the money of getting equipment. Sometimes, being on a HazMat unit, the maintenance of the equipment is just as much. And fortunately, on the trench rescue side, some of that stuff's not as technical and needs as much maintenance as others. But yeah, there's so many facets to construction that we just don't consider. But yet, more and more, you're seeing more fire departments responding to construction sites. Oh, for God's sakes, you guys just a couple of years ago had a pretty good fire at a almost completed apartment complex.
Yes.
We start talking about, when they're going vertical with these buildings, there's a hazard there. Is there a life hazard there? Who knows? I know that You guys over there deal with the same type of problem we deal with on our side of the river, and there's people that are out living on the streets that'll find themselves sleep, a place to sleep anywhere. So just because it doesn't look like it's never vacant. Nothing's ever vacant. And water supply issues, all of those things. These are things that have to be looked at on the front side. Sometimes they're putting the hydrants in, but they're not in yet. How long are you going to have to lay, or what is it going to take for you to be able to conquer, what's been thrown in your lap?
Absolutely. I think good firefighters are always thinking, always doing that ABC process. And if you're just sitting in a recliner all day or on a couch all day, it might be great that you know exactly when Wheel of Fortune comes on. Yay. You might be a hell of a cook. But if you're not out there checking your community, you don't care about your community. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. And it's not just me. There's several people, within my organization I know that do it. But when I see something new going up, we can't wait to go over there. And we learned something really neat about the patio homes that are right by my station. They literally built almost like a safe room in between the garage and the living quarters of the home itself. And it was a cinder block square with a concrete ceiling, with and heavier doorways. And that was something where the guys and I were, I told them, I said, man, I'm glad we saw this now, so we never try to pull these ceilings, if we ever were to have a fire in here. And it's because we got in there before drywall went up that we were able to identify those things. So I recommend anybody, when you see a job site, man, stop. You're not going to find too many contractors that are going to say, no, I don't want you here.
No.
It's more of getting to look at, I like to get to look at the bones of a place, before they start covering all of it up. So, it's going to help in your tactical thinking of things when it comes to those buildings. And we all know that there's been no slowdown of construction here recently.
No, not at all. It's only going to get worse, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems that way. And like I said, with the infrastructure bill, we're talking about big stuff. There's a lot of bigger cities, a lot of other cities that are working on some pretty old infrastructure. We tapped into a 96-inch brick-lined, wood-encased sewer in the middle of downtown Louisville that was laid in the early 1900s and still being used. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty amazing stuff. Because you think about, God, what did it take to put that in back so many years ago? versus what it would take us now. But once again, it's showing that, there's a lot of older infrastructure. They're going to be updating all of this stuff. So the trenching and excavating that's going to be going on in the next couple of years is not going to get any slower.
I tell you what, I look forward to taking your class in January. Very excited about that. But I want to end on this. I like to end on this. Can you tell me the best firehouse prank played on you, or that you played on somebody else?
In my early days of the volunteer, I was lucky enough to be a live-in at a great place over in the middle of Newburgh here in Louisville. So we were in a lower income area. We stayed extremely busy, but living up there with the guys that I lived with, it was always pranks. I mean, there would be booster lines pulled up stairwells to the showers, but nowhere to go. But I think the best was the gentleman that he liked to play a lot of pranks on people, but we got him. He was in the shower, and we took a hair dryer and we plugged it in and turned it on, and then we took another hair dryer that wasn't plugged in and turned on and threw it over the top of the shower. And I've never seen somebody come unglued the way that he did, thinking that thing was on, and came out, met the tile floor, and his feet went higher than everything else on him. And so yeah, it was. We laughed for a long time about that. It still comes up. But I mean, we're talking 20 something years ago, and it still comes up. But those days, the firehouse pranks and things, they're a lot of fun, but we all know in today's time, they're not as easy to do.
They really aren't. And I'm tickled to death that there were no cameras back in the day in your phone. Cause, yeah. That's the bad thing about this is, some of the best pranks people tell me, they're not the best ones. They just can't tell me the real. Yeah, they can't tell me the real ones. I don't want.
No one's going to incriminate themselves.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, man. No, Jake, I really appreciate you having me. I look forward to coming and seeing you guys in New Albany in January. February, I'll be in Owensboro, Kentucky for their Green River Fire Officer School. I'm doing 2 sessions on there Friday, kind of an intro to the construction side thing, and then more of a tactics in the afternoon. So I'm looking forward to that. And then, of course, the big show in April. Super, super excited. I'll be there Wednesday at 3:30. Will be my class time. So
I'm up there all week, brother.
Yeah, we'll get together. I was a lot better my first year. I was blessed to be able to do it, but a 1:30 time slot on a Thursday, when all the exhibits open at 1 on Thursday.
I was going to say, yeah, that's when the exhibits
drives down your attendance a tad little bit. So I was super, super stoked to be able to get Wednesday and surrounded by some absolutely phenomenal, instructors. So that I'm really looking forward to it.
But brother, if anybody listening, you're going up to FDIC, you've got to catch Mike's class. Brother Wallingford, thank you so much for being on my show.
Thanks again, Jake. Appreciate it.
Stay safe, brother.
Today's podcast was sponsored by Fire Facilities, designers and manufacturers of realistic, built-to-last training structures and mobile units for 30 years. Make training count. Visit firefacilities.com for more information.